good morning to one and all present. Today, we've gathered here for the 78th session of Study Circle. Our speaker for the day is Dr. N.V. Badarinath, former PO of TRT1. Today, he'll be speaking about pleadings in civil suits, which will be a continuation and the third session in his series. I now invite Mr. Vaidyanathan to give the welcome address and a brief introduction of the speaker.
A warm happy morning to all my seniors and legal fraternities of the Study Circle meet, which come across its semi-sesquicentennial session about need of the art topics. On this score, I heartily welcome to all today to our Study Circle for its 78th session on the topic of pleadings in civil suits part 3, a continuous part of its earlier session. The resource person is Dr. N.V. Badarinath, former presiding officer, DRT1 at Chennai. It is not necessary to define the rocking success of its previous sessions, of its reason on interaction method that used by the resource person, which made the participants inactive rather than inactive. Highlight was the precedence referred from trial courts to Supreme Courts. It happens to make more participants across the states. He also hinted about the continuous of his earlier session as part 3, hence this session. So we are waiting eagerly for the same. Now over to the resource person, Dr. N.V. Badarinath. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Vaidyanathan, for the fine words you have spoken to me. My dear friends, especially the younger generation of advocates, I aim my speech always at the young lawyers, as if you say pleadings are the foundations of a list, young lawyers are the backbone of Indian judiciary and the hope of the Indian judiciary. So my dear young lawyers, please focus on this very important subject called pleadings, because it is the foundation that you are laying for the list that you are going to lay in the form of a suit before a civil court. Well, having said that, I hope I'm audible and clear. Right. Having said that, I just take you to the backdrop of today's speech, as my speech today is in continuation to the first and second sessions of the deliberations that I had with all of you. Well, this pleading is an important part, most vital part of a litigation, as a party puts his facts before you, and it is for you, be that a plaintiff or a defendant, to put the facts in a proper format and place all the relevant facts that your client has brought to your notice, and then convert it into a pleading called a plaint or a written statement. So you have a vital role to play, and we have discussed about certain limitations that lawyers face while preparing it. And then we have further discussed what a pleading should contain. And then if the pleading inadvertently failed to contain some factual aspect, can it be brought later? If so, at what stage? And then whether making such an amendment or bringing an additional pleading is a right, unfettered, or it is subject to the restrictions under the law. That is what we have so far discussed. And today, we are going to discuss some more aspects of the post pleadings. As I said just a little while ago, the role of a lawyer is to first prepare a pleading and file it. That is a pre-litigation, pre-institution rather, to say appropriately, pre-institution pleading. And the role doesn't end there. If situation demands, if the facts change, or something that emanated afresh, maybe you need to amend or bring new facts to the notice of the tribunal, court. We are strictly on civil pleadings. So that is post filing of a pleading. Now this post filing of a pleading has again two stages: pre-trial, during trial or a pendency of trial, and post-trial. Post-trial is where the matter is at the stage of hearing, arguments, or before the judgment is pronounced. You may recall under the old, that is pre-2002 amended CPC 76 amendment. Till 2002, there was no such step like arguments. Only after 2002, we have it. After trial, if you see, order 20, only judgment. But in the post 2002 amendment, rather 2002 amendment, a stage called arguments, both oral and written. Oral, limited, and written with the leave of the court, all are allowed. So now we are talking about, today we are going to discuss about an amendment that is required to be brought post filing of the reply statement or the plaint, either as the case may be. Now in this process, I don't want to again take you to the limitations, if any, that one may face before commencement of the trial, insofar as amendment of the pleadings are concerned. It is almost without any serious fetter. If you want to make an amendment to the pleading before the commencement of the trial, probably it is generously considered, almost considered. Rarely they dismiss. But if you want to make an amendment after commencement of the trial, what are the factors we have already discussed? Now, there may be another situation. It is no doubt, I'm talking about a situation which is no doubt post trial, post commencement of the trial or during the pendency of the trial, and also after the trial is concluded. A situation where a new material fact had come to light, or the facts and circumstances of the case that require, in the opinion of the advocate or in the interest of the client, to bring an amendment either to the plaint or to the written statement. See, I'm talking about a new fact emerging. We have earlier discussed about something, the fact was in existence, but that was not brought to the notice of the lawyer by the client, or the client came to know about an event or a fact relevant to the case which had already taken place. Inadvertently, he omitted to bring it to the notice of the lawyer, so lawyer failed to mention it. That part we have discussed, what was the case. Now we are discussing today about an event which has surfaced after the pleadings were filed. You know, a plaint or a written statement is a private document till it is filed in the court. The moment it is filed in the court, it becomes a public document and it will be in the domain of the public. And then, insofar as the amendment is concerned, the amendment is subject to the conditions laid down. Therefore, the fetters operate. So what are the fetters that operate in a situation where the facts have changed midway the trial or soon after the trial, but before the orders were pronounced. These two stages, midway the trial, before the judgment is pronounced. It became necessary that an amendment has to be made. Now, what would be the possible such amendments that one would face in a practice before a trial court? See, my dear young lawyers, I am only telling you about the precautions to be taken in the petition that you intend to file for amendment of a pleading, post written filing of written statement or a plea. Only what care one should take, because it's a drafting, that is what we are discussing. The merits of it, outcome of it is something different. But when you draft a petition, what are the parameters? What are the fundamentals? What it should contain, so as to enable you to first succeed in getting your petition heard. Then, if sufficient factual information is projected and it's properly made, then it can even be allowed. Or if you are for the opposite party, it can even be get dismissed. Therefore, we are in the discussion as to how an amendment petition, which necessitated out of the situation that has arisen, post filing of the reply statement during the trial before the judgment is pronounced, has to be dealt with. Right. Now, let us see, we come across umpteen number of examples in property matters before the original side of the trial courts, where the situation gets changed, especially in property matters. You see, you may file a suit for an injunction contending that you are in possession and enjoyment of the property. The sine qua non for grant of an injunction, which is equitable relief under the Specific Relief Act, is that a person should be in lawful possession of the property, and there shall be a threat perception as to his possession. Possession and enjoyment are the paramount factors. So you assert in your plaint that you are in possession, and then on the basis of some document or some material, if you go by, see, there are temporary injunctions and perpetual injunction. Temporary injunction is governed under the Order 39, 1 and 2 of Civil Procedure Code, whereas perpetual injunction is governed under the Specific Relief Act. Now, in a perpetual injunction, the governing factors are different because that is the final outcome. But a temporary injunction is which is governed under 39, 1 and 2, where you have to satisfy the court by an affidavit or otherwise. What is otherwise means you can file any document or any affidavit, some material acceptable under law, and convince the court and get an order. Now, you have come to the court saying you are in possession, and then you have filed a document, and then saying that under this document, the defendant delivered possession to me. Therefore, grant me an injunction, as there is a threat lurking at the hands of the defendants, at the behest of the defendant, their men and agents. Therefore, grant me an injunction. If that is your prayer, and then a defendant files a reply statement saying that, yes, no doubt I have executed the document. The document says I have delivered the possession, but factually I have not delivered possession. Possession is with me. This is the record. What he has got only at best a symbolic possession, but actual possession is with me. So a person in actual possession cannot be restrained from enjoying his property and the claim of the plaintiff that he is in possession and enjoyment of the property is false, if that is the written statement. So pleadings are over because there is a written statement, pleadings are over. Matter has gone to the trial. Now, we are now a situation where the court is required to examine basing on your pleadings. I'm only focusing on pleadings. Now, in this backdrop of pleadings, what the court should see, whether the plaintiff is in possession or not, because you know very well that an equitable relief, the suitor shall succeed on the merits of his case, but not on the weakness, if any, in the case of the other side. So whether or not the defendant established his plea that he had not parted with the possession, though there is a recital in the document. Let us say the document that the plaintiff claimed is an agreement of sale. You know, a person in possession of the property basing on agreement of sale also can maintain a suit for injunction while reserving his right under Order 2, Rule 2 to file a suit for specific performance. See, one of the questions that were asked in the first meeting of my or a second discussion about Order 2, Rule 2. One such situation is this. If you are having an agreement of sale for a particular piece of property, you don't want to file specific performance because there should be refusal, demand and refusal. You should ask for so as to commence the period of limitation. And then, or you may even reserve it for future, expecting that person to come. But in the meanwhile, there is a threat perception. Therefore, you just want to file a suit for injunction. You can reserve the right to file a, because cause of action has already arisen, you have to file a suit you can file a suit for bare injunction while holding your right, reserving your right by filing a petition under Order 2, Rule 2 CPC, and then obtain the leave and file it later. So this is the case we are talking about. A person here is an agreement holder, right? The defendant has not disputed the agreement. He had said that though there is a recital, if actually it is not given, this is the background. The matter has gone for trial. Then, you know, I said we realize the mistakes only when as we start realizing rather when the trial starts. Because that is a testing time. No, plaintiff statement are tested. We start slowly, oh, we should have pleaded like this, or we should not have pleaded like this, slowly. And we get more and more wisdom and maturity when the matter goes to arguments. Of course, that stage, very little that one can do. Therefore, now what happened, let us see. In a case like this, if you are appearing for a defendant and he comes to you saying, actually, I wanted to change my defense, saying, I have executed the document, but I have not delivered the position. The document that I have executed is not a sale, but it's for a mutual development. He wanted to twist or change it. Maybe that is the reality, we don't know. He comes with that instructions to you and says, sir, please seek an amendment to the written statement, saying this written statement that I have executed, the agreement of sale that I have executed is for a joint development. Therefore, he can't claim any execution. We both wanted to develop the property and make a gain or something. And I'm not accepting the plea which I have earlier accepted. I want to retract from it. And then, with that pleading, I want to contest. Now, in this backdrop, well, you may, as a lawyer, you have to go by the instructions of the client normally, unless the instructions are to do an illegal thing or the object is against the public policy. Or in those cases, only you can reject. But generally, you can give an advisory saying, oh, court may or may not, or this judge won't go, wait, some judge will come, he will allow all kinds. That's all like something internal things that sharing. But if a client says, please file, sir, means you have to either file, or if you don't want to file, give up, somebody else may or may not. So let us say, if you are confronted with some situation where an amendment to the written statement is sought, taking a U-turn from the first one. What was the first admission? I have executed an agreement of sale in favor of the plaintiff, but I have not parted with the possession. It's with me. Now he wanted to amend the written statement, now saying, I have executed the agreement, but it is not sale agreement. It is a mutually favorable agreement. Therefore, the question of he getting an English correspondence, he wanted to change that. So the second plea would certainly destroy the admission which was there in the first written statement. I use the word admission. Admission is defined under the Indian Evidence Act. An admission binds the parties. There is an estoppel against the admission if it is clear and unequivocal. We are talking about admission in a civil. So, two things have emerged, legal things. One is, by making this plea, this defendant wants to get over an admission that he had already made and then introduce a new plea. Now, in this backdrop, what do you think whether now I'm giving you a case where you have decided to file because the client wanted it. You have to then not just file it and get it dismissed. You have to bring success to your client, because our professional duty is to ensure that within the framework of law, everything possible be done so as to protect the interest of the client. We can't do anything that is detrimental to the client. Therefore, you have taken it up. Now you have to draft a petition. You are for a defendant, you are to draft a petition whereby you have to get over the earlier admission made, which is generally binding on the parties. Then you also have to get your new plea introduced. So one plea is removed and new plea is going to be introduced if the petition is considered. If it's dismissed, different. If you are for a defendant, this is the role. Now, in the same situation, you are a plaintiff. You have filed a bare injunction suit contending that you are in possession. And then the defendant contended that you are not in possession, as usual. If he admits your possession, matter ends in disposal. By admission, without trial, the court can pass an order. It can be. To the extent admitted, court can pass a decree. There is no doubt on that. Now, defendant denied, saying you are not in possession. So I have to establish. Now, what happened in a suit like that, a bare injunction suit? This man has, during the pendency, he has encroached into your property. So you wanted to then seek a declaration and recovery of possession. And you felt, because it is also a legal issue to some extent, and factually it is correct according to your client, that this man, while the trial is in progress, he had encroached into a part of the property. Therefore, you are now compelled. You can't take injunction and then that's what you feel. These are the bare facts. Therefore, you wanted to introduce an amendment saying the suit for permanent injunction be converted into one for declaration and recovery of possession. That is the plea. And defendant here is opposing, saying, how can you, on a fresh cause of action, you have to file a separate suit. You have a remedy. If the right that I accrued to me, you can't defeat it in this way. You have to file a suit. This man, what is the right? This man says in this given case that I perfected my title by adverse possession. So I'm in possession. That is the plea. So how can you file a separate suit? No amendment, new cause of action, new relief. That is the situation where, as a lawyer for plaintiff, you are confronted with. Now, these are the two situations. You are a defendant lawyer, you are a plaintiff lawyer. Now, let us come back to each of these examples and discuss. Now, the first example I gave about filing a petition by a defendant saying that admission is not really on my part. In fact, in one of the matters, the party went to the extent of, I have not instructed my lawyer at all like that. My lawyer has drafted, because always clients, when they want to change the lawyer, and when they change the lawyer and take the file to the new lawyer, they say, I didn't say like, supposing the defendant was set ex party, and then he takes away the bundle and goes, he says, my lawyer has not followed it properly. And in many cases, this is the common difference. In all those cases, I used to cite the judgment while I'm in Chennai, the Chennai High Court judgment, that it's the duty of the client to pursue. It's not always the obligation of the lawyer to inform. And if you are not pursuing it to the client, your duty doesn't end by giving instructions or by giving the path fee or giving the papers to lawyer. You also have to pursue. And I used to many times, of course, without dismissing it, some on terms used to do. So many clients have the feeling, irrespective of that, they take invariable the plea that earlier lawyer did not inform the date. So whatever may be the reason here. Now, if here is a case where also they said, I have not even instructed this lawyer to plead that I am admitting the agreement, but he had pleaded so. So that is one ground. Like this, he had come out with these pleas. Now tell me, since you are dealing with a petition to amend the written statement, what would be your endeavor to plead in that petition? Because your petition must be very strong. You have to get over an admission which has been there, undoubtedly, categorical terms in the first reply statement. You have said, I have admitted, but now you want to amend it, delete that portion. Say, I have not admitted that, but I admitted this, and this is not an agreement of sale or that kind of things. So in this situation, what are the relevant things to be seen is very, very important. As a trial lawyer, see, again and again I say this, that please focus on all the facets of law applicable to the fact situation before you draft. Because you can't have a petition again to amend the amended petition. Right? People are there still. They file a petition to amend a reply statement, and yet another petition to amend this amended statement. And in that there is a delay. So delay condemnation, all kind of things. See, get rid of that kind of practice. My advice to the young lawyers is, since you know that earlier you have admitted the execution, now you are trying to take it. You must make a strong petition. Here comes the role of the lawyer as a draftsman, a good draftsman. So what is that you look into? When I say admission, admission is that again defined under the Indian Evidence Act. Admission is binding, and it would act even says an admitted fact need not be proved. If I'm saying 56 or so or 59, Indian Evidence Act. Right. And once you these admission, how do you get over? You have to bestow your thought on it. I can only give you one or two instances because I don't have the expertise. But I can tell you one thing. I'm putting you on a caution that it is you who have to work hard and find out what are the grounds that you can take to get over the admission. Now, let us take this case itself. Can an admission be, can a party who had admitted a fact in clear and categorical terms get away that? First, that is the first question. How many of you would say, the young lawyers, that admission we can say, earlier I admitted, now I'm not admitted. I can get over it. Is there any lawyer here, young lawyer, who can say that I have admitted, once admitted, it can't be taken, or it can be taken away? Either side. Yes. Anyone? All right. I take it that few of you would say that admission cannot be taken, but and the rest of you would say that admission can be ignored by way of an amendment. These are, let us say, these are the two arguments. We are only going by for a hypothetical situation, right? If these are the two arguments, if you are of the view that you can get over an admission, and therefore what is required is just say say I could not make this amendment earlier, by mistake it is said. Like that, in simple words, you think you can draft a petition for amendment. Probably. Why probably? I'm sure you will have very difficult times before the court in getting your petition allowed. Because if we go by the law as it stands, admission is binding on the parties. However, the exception is that you can explain an admission, saying under what circumstances you have admitted. Right? Today you called the disputed document as lease, but tomorrow you have realized that it is not a lease, but it's a license. You want to convert that lease into lease into license. That earlier admission that it was a lease cannot be wiped off, but you have under law an opportunity to explain. When it is a license, how you construed it as a lease. When it is an agreement of sale, how you construed it as an agreement for development, or vice versa. This explanation you can give. Then if your explanation is convincing, then you will be given an opportunity to amend. Again, the merits of that amendment is a different issue. You will be given an opportunity. Therefore, your pleading should focus on explaining that admission. So you have to write in that petition, under what circumstances you have construed so, you have opined so, you came to that conclusion. Then that admission, the court will be able to give you an opportunity and then see if your explanation is convincing. Then you may get a relief as per the situation. So the bottom line here is that whenever you are seeking an amendment, the backdrop is very, very important. Don't say that my client is illiterate, my client is tough, his earlier lawyer did not take this plea, or all kind of things. You have to come out with the concrete facts, because on a sympathetic grounds or on blame game, you cannot succeed in any matter. You need to come. So, my dear young lawyers, when you draft a petition to get over an admission, always focus on explaining that admission. I give you one case in this regard. If you read that, it will help you in drafting a petition which the when it comes to an amendment, one second, I just it's slipped from my table. One second. Yeah, sorry. Now, I'm giving you one case. And then tell me, if you are a lawyer, what would be the role that you would play, either for the plaintiff or a defendant? I will give the citation after the discussion. I just want you to have some discussion on it before we go. This is the facts in this case are, I've already brought to you in the model illustration that I gave. I again repeat it. Now this is a suit filed basing on an agreement entered between the parties. The plaintiff filed a suit for perpetual injunction, restraining the respondent from interfering with the possession. It's a bare injunction suit. Then a written statement has been filed saying, it is, see, I read out what is said in the written statement. It is true that this defendant has entered into an agreement of sale with the plaintiff, agreeing to sell the suit schedule property on 25/1/1991 and for sale consideration of rupees so much. Then he said, but the possession of the scheduled property was not delivered to the plaintiff at all, even though it is averred in the agreement of sale. This is the written statement. Plaintiff is that agreement of sale and given possession, they are trying to interfere. Reply statement is, it is true that agreement, but possession is not given. This is it. Now, with these pleadings, the matter has gone to trial. This is before Supreme Court. I'll take you from the trial stage, how the matter transformed. Simple example, but it would give you a wonderful idea to the young lawyers. That's why I'm citing this. Then, midway the trial, the trial has started. The trial started, then application under Order 6, Rule 17 amendment had been filed by the replies by the defendant saying, delete the following amendment in para 6 of the written statement. The amendment sought is, what is that he wanted to delete? It is true that this defendant has entered into an agreement of sale with the plaintiff agreeing to sell. So the very execution of the agreement now, which was there in para 6, he wanted to delete. And then what he wanted to add in its place, it is incorrect to state that the defendant have entered into an agreement of sale with the plaintiff. Total U-turn. It is true, now it is incorrect. This is the amendment. Then what he wanted to say further, it is true that these defendants have entered into an agreement with the plaintiff for the development of the suit land for mutual benefit of the parties. The second line he wanted to add. So he wanted to get over the admission of execution of agreement of sale. It is true to be corrected as it is not true, and it is further to be corrected as this agreement of sale is entered for the purpose of development, that is mutual benefit. This is. Now, with this main amendment, we are concerned with this main amendment. The matter before the trial court, it is after commencement of the trial. Then that's why post pleadings amendment. Then if you are a trial judge, see, this is the, I verbatim read out what the amendments are. This is opposed by the plaintiff. Then if you are a trial judge, the trial just commenced. There is not no latches. It's not the case of either side. There are latches or delays. Law also allows filing of a petition after trial subject to certain conditions, which we have already discussed earlier. It's not an unfettered the right of the plaintiff to oppose it. It has some no doubt, some fetters, but defendant can get over that even our post-trial, post-trial or during trial, amendment is maintainable. We are not going into that. Now, with these bare facts, which are in fact the same what is there in this, if you are a trial lawyer, both the pleadings are before you, what would you do? Would you allow the petition or would you dismiss it? You can't keep no answer that I will not pronounce order. I'll reserve it. That answer we will not now accept. Though you can do that when you are a judge. But tell me, what would you do? Would you do by giving reason? How many of you would allow this by numbers? Raise of hands. I think I can go to gallery view and see. How many of you would?
If you have any responses, the participants can use the raise hand options or they can.
Let us discuss. I'm discussing to know the correct thing. See, I'm only telling, I don't know what I'm telling is true or not, whether I'm telling the proper law I'm teaching. Sorry, not teaching, I'm learning. Every talk I make is to learn myself and check myself. So you young lawyers, I know the seniors here, they knew very well. But learning from young lawyers is always a pleasure. Right? Okay. I think few of, I think they, anyway, okay. If somebody takes part, it would be fine. Right? All right. See, come out with some answer. You may, unless your wrong law will not come to your rescue. You are wrong. Therefore, something you have to find out to get out of that wrong. If you are right, you also have a reasons under law. So, for either being on the right, on the side of allowing or on the dismissal, you must have some reasons, na? Come out. Nothing.
Mr. Chellimuthu says that he would allow the application as it explains the earlier admission.
What is the explanation there? Please tell me. I read out what is there in this. He says he wanted delete this. No explanation here. Don't take facts which are not there. He said, that's all.
Mr. Vaidyanathan says that the very vital part of the written statement, such could not be an amendment. The very admission is the vital part of the written statement and hence it should not be allowed.
So, right. Now we got two different views, very vital. One view is that if it has got some reasons, it can be allowed. That is what, on the presumption that it has reasons, it can be allowed. That is what one lawyer had said. The other lawyer says that, how can you allow an admission to be taken away? Admission will be there. Therefore, amendment. Now the question is, even while sustaining the admission, can the amendment be allowed? So, while drafting, what you should have in mind, assuming that this admission will be there, or in fact it will be there, still I should get an opportunity at least to dilute that admission. Right? So that is the latter view. That is how a lawyer should, a young lawyer at the trial stage should think. Don't give up. Fight. Always fight. Because a lot of ammunition is there in the books, now in the chips today. So now, what happened? I will before we come to the final outcome, I would say the trial court simply dismissed it. You know why? How it dismissed it? I read out. The trial court dismissed the petition, holding that it is not open to the respondents to explain. See, the language is very, very important. The trial court dismissed the petition, holding that it is not open to the respondents to explain whether the agreement entered into was an agreement of sale or for mutual benefit, since the agreement was silent in that behalf. See, the trial court had taken it altogether a different view. It says, when the document is silent, you are putting something into the document. Therefore, it is not allowed. See, another challenge that a trial lawyer. So you have to visualize this kind of situation also in mind. It is already you are facing with a uphill task of getting over an admission. Second, another task is that the document is silent. What is not there in the document, can you substitute by way of an amendment? That is another challenge. So that is what struck in the mind of the trial judge. He was not focusing on the aspect of admission cannot be get over. He says the document is silent on this aspect. What the document says, possession is delivered, it is an agreement of sale. Now what he wanted to say, no, it is not a sale agreement, it is for mutual benefit, a sharing agreement or development agreement, something like that. So there's another angle to it. That is why I wanted a trial lawyer to investigate various angles, because you are laying a foundation. If the foundation is not strong, the edifice will fall. And unless you lay a strong foundation for yourself, your survival in this competitive field is also will be difficult. So it is a foundation not just for the sake of that particular case, but for yourself also. For you, it will be a legal foundation for that a factual strength that the case you are getting. A career foundation rather for you. That is a case foundation. Therefore, take this a very, very, very important role that you play at this stage only. At this stage only. Therefore, the trial court said, since the document doesn't say so, you are introducing a new fact. Therefore, I dismissed it. Then matter went to the High Court. The High Court in CRP so-and-so allowed the amendment. It reversed the trial court order. So now what happened? If we go by this judgment, even if there is an admission, you can get over. It's for the plaintiff. Plaintiff is now a disadvantage. Defendant is an advantage in this scenario. What is that? The defendant today, if we go by this judgment up to the High Court, is that despite an admission, you are allowed to take back. Despite the document is silent. And on the other hand, the document conspicuously says it is a sale agreement in favor of the plaintiff. Yet you are allowing the defendant to amend and then get over the admission and also introduce a new plea which is not there in the document. After all, the document is the main factor in the trial of that suit. Because you cannot, unless you disown a document, you can't lead evidence contrary to the terms of the document, 91, 92 of the Evidence Act. So, notwithstanding all this, here is a case where the trial court allowed. Then as a plaintiff, you are definitely at a disadvantage, right? So you have taken it, let us say, to the Supreme Court. Now you are in Supreme Court. You are all in the Supreme Court. The strength of 34, if I am right. Now here we have about 64 today. Now, if you are all in the Supreme Court, what would you do? Would you confirm the trial court order? Or the High Court order? Don't say remand the matter. We want an answer. Remanding is then passing on the buck, unless a really situation demands. It's a general observation of mine. So tell me, what would you do if you are in a Supreme Court? See, two legal factors here are ignored. One legal factor is an admission cannot be taken away. Then a new fact has been allowed to be introduced. And what was allowed to be introduced is also contrary. Because what was there in the document? That it is a sale agreement. Now what it is now sought to be done? It is a development agreement, mutual development, where the interest of the defendant is also been sought to be included under this amendment. Now, in the Supreme Court, or if it comes to your judgment, what are the factors you see? Result is something different. Yes, allow dismiss, but result should be followed by reasons. No? Otherwise, it is always said case decided and case disposed of. Right? Disposal, High Court asked the trial courts the disposal list. Supreme Court perhaps asked the High Courts the disposal list. But did you find the word cases decided? Decision making is different from disposal. Today we are interested in statistics, disposals, not decide. A case decided is something that involves application. A disposal can be done in many ways. You know, I think you know the difference. Okay. Now tell me, the floor to now guide me on this. I am at a loss as to what would be the finding. I am for the, let us say, defendant, and the plaintiff had gone. I wish it be dismissed before the Supreme, or the plaintiff, as a plaintiff. I don't want that to be allowed. And you are for the defendant. You want it to be sustained. Now tell me what factors would weigh for allowing or dismissing there. Keep those legal things. Admission binding, new fact introduced, and then plaintiff has lost an important right of relying on the admission. This is the in gist. Now, as a Supreme Court judge, what would you do? Or if you are a lawyer appearing before Supreme Court, what would be your argument? You can have either role.
There are a couple of responses to your earlier question. They have said that they would confirm the High Court. B.A. Chandrasekhar has said that he would confirm the High Court order. And then there are a couple of responses that says that they would confirm the trial court order.
Now, the person who says that he would the order of the High Court be confirmed.
There is another response from
What reason? Tell me the reason.
There's a response from Mr. Vaidyanathan. He has given his answer with reason. He says that he would upheld the High Court order as the factor of admission, which is vital to the pleading, could not be revoked, and the facts which are not in the agreement could not be substantiated in a pleading. Hence, the Supreme Court would upheld and confirm the High Court order.
Fine. Any contrary view? With reasons. All right.
I think Mr. Chandrasekhar has said we are giving chance to depose the case, whatever it is. Then Mr. Y.N. Srinivas says no oral evidence can be let in if the document is clear.
Okay. I think that applies to registered documents. Anyway, it's good that something had come. Right. Now I will present you what is the argument before the Supreme Court. Learned counsel for the appellant vehemently contends that having made an admission that respondent had entered into an agreement of sale and having made certain averments in support thereof, it was not open to the respondents to wriggle out from the admission. So the point is, admission you cannot get over. That was the argument by the appellant lawyer. Admission is a material piece of evidence which would be in favor of the appellant and binds the respondents. That's what we have discussed just. When the admission is sought to be withdrawn and some additional facts are sought to be introduced, it would be inconsistent, and the High Court was not justified in permitting such an amendment. This is exactly the thinking that is going on in many of the lawyers who are in favor of the plaintiff to thinking it. So the contrary view is that of the defendants. Now, in this backdrop, what the Supreme Court said, this is by Justice K. Ramaswamy and Justice Halsaria. Now, in this, then this argument, after hearing the lawyers, what the Supreme Court said, we find no force in the contention of the appellant. No force in the contention of the appellant. It is settled law that even the admission can be explained and even inconsistent plea could be taken in the pleadings. See, two things have come out. Two things have come out very clearly here. One is an admission can be explained. So it is not an absolute bar, provided you explain. Then, second thing, even inconsistent plea could be taken in the pleadings. Inconsistent plea. Here is a clear inconsistency. One is agreement in his favor to sell the land. Now he wants to say, no, it is a mutual agreement for development of both interests. Therefore, inconsistent. Both can be taken. Now I tell you, I read out further. It is seen that in para 6 of the written statement, a definite stand was taken, but subsequently in the application for amendment, it was sought to be modified as indicated in the petition. In that view of the matter, we find that there is no material irregularity committed by the High Court in exercising its power under 115 CPC in permitting amendment of the written statement. Now, this case law is Akshaya Restaurant versus P. Anjappa. This is 1995, supplement to supplement Supreme Court to SEC page 303. Now, this case had come for discussion before another bench long after this judgment. Now tell me, according to this judgment, despite an admission, you can still seek an amendment. And that amendment can be inconsistent to the original stand. Now keep this in the background. Now we have another judgment which is subsequent to this. And let us see what the law is. Interestingly, this judgment in Akshaya Caterers case, Akshaya Restaurant case, has been considered in this judgment by Justice S.B. Sinha and Justice Sirpurkar in 2008 7 SCC. Now, here is an identical case, like a party turning volte-face. Here is a case where it was a case based on a will filed, and then the sixth respondent in this case has admitted in her written statement that very categorically say that in the written statement she admitted the will. In fact, as per the facts of that case, she is one of the attestants to that. Notwithstanding that fact, she had admitted the due execution of will by the testator. Now, as a dispute, the legatees are challenged. Now, here the important factor is a person who admitted the will filed a written statement. Then what she did is, subsequently, the respondent 6 filed another written statement denying and disputing the claim of the appellant in toto. One written statement filed admitting the will. Now, soon after, she filed yet another written statement and sought permission to expunge the first statement and take on record the second statement. In the first statement, she admitted the will, which is the subject matter of challenge in the suit. And in the second statement, she took a U-turn and said, I have not executed. I'm not admitting the will. Now, this is the background. Now, Akshaya Caterers case, apply now. Admission, she is trying to get over. The plea that she wanted to introduce is that she had not executed. By taking away the plea that in the first written statement that she had, not executed, no, that will has been executed. And now she says will has not been executed. She is not admitting the will in the statement. They almost same background. Now, then what happened was, this inconsistent and a plea that has the effect of taking away the admission made by her was allowed by the trial court in this case. Perhaps relying on the Akshaya Restaurant case of Justice K. Rameshwar. Then the matter went to the High Court. High Court then, here as I said in the earlier, the plea put forth by the party, the explanation for the admission is, I did not instruct the lawyer at all to admit the execution. But my lawyer had written so, put entire blame on the lawyer in the first written statement. And the High Court ordered that verify whether the plea that she had not instructed the lawyer at the first instance, wherein an admission as to the due execution of the will has been made. And the trial court then gave a report saying, no, her plea is incorrect. Then what happened was the High Court had then dismissed the appeal, confirming the order of the trial court, saying that trial court is right. Then the matter has gone to Supreme Court. Now, before Supreme Court, this case, Akshaya Caterers case, has been cited. And then my reading of the entire judgment, especially para 19, is that the Supreme Court has sailed with the view taken in the Akshay restaurant case. I read out. First, what the Supreme Court said was, no doubt here is a case where an admission is now sought to be wiped out, and new, totally contradictory. Execution admitted, now execution denied. Totally opposite, please. In that scenario, what the Supreme Court said? Now, a categorical admission cannot be resiled from. This is the very crucial part. Remember, an admission you cannot resile, but you can do what? A categorical admission cannot be resiled from, but in a given case, it may be explained or clarified. So what it suggests, please tell me, what it suggests. What the Supreme Court said was, offering explanation in regard to an admission or explaining the same, however, would depend upon the nature and character thereof. It may be that a defendant is entitled to take an alternative plea. See, the inconsistent is alternative. Alternative plea. Such alternative pleas, however, cannot be mutually destructive of each other. So now there is an improvement over. An inconsistent plea is different from alternative. An alternative plea shall not be mutually self-destructive. So these are the parameters. I'm focusing more on this para. This para is very, very important because we are at the stage of drafting. So whenever you are taking such an adventurous plea of taking away the admission, please ensure that the explanation is sufficiently given. What made you to admit so? Not the silly and routine and rhetoric advocate did I not instructed, and it was inadvertent. Not that. You need to come out, explain. That depends on, as said by Supreme Court, each and every case. You need to call out and put the inputs at that stage. Then you should also ensure that what you are seeking is an alternative, but not a self-destructive. This is what you should ensure. An improvement over the earlier one. But having said that, this is para 28 of the judgment. Now, interestingly, in para 19, what the Supreme Court relied is, it has been relied, is the law laid down in the Akshay Caterers case, Akshay Restaurants case. Let us read that. Yet again in Akshaya Restaurant versus P. Anjanappa, the following observations made by the court. We find no force in the condition. The settled law is that even an admission can be explained. So what I have read there, that has been just reproduced here. it is seen from para 6 of the written statement that a definite stand was taken, but subsequently in the application for amendment, it was sought to be modified as indicated in the petition. In that view of the matter, we find there is no material irregularity committed by the High Court. So here is now the law that is available to a draftsman who is to draft a petition whereby it is required to take away an admission and introduce a plea which is inconsistent. Now, you please further ponder over. Keep these two judgments. Read. And then come to a conclusion whether the finding in Akshaya Keter case that an inconsistent plea can be taken comes in conflict with the finding in this judgment that it is said that a defendant is entitled to take an alternative plea, but such alternative pleas, however, cannot be mutually destructive of each other. So, even my understanding is that even though you are entitled to take a inconsistent and altogether a different plea, having the effect of wiping off the admitted plea, yet if it is mutually destructive, courts will not allow that. So another parameter today for the young lawyers while drafting the petition is to ensure that the plea that you are going to introduce, even though it is inconsistent, yet it is not self-destructive. There can be some self-destructive pleas. No, you plead a tenant that you are a tenant, and midway you say, I'm the landlord. Right. So that is certainly a self-destructive. So yet another parameter that is added to test your petition is whether it is mutually destructive of each other. The plea pleaded, please sought to be introduced, mutually should not be self-destructive. This is what. So this is the law which I have come across with my limited reading and my limited knowledge. Therefore, friends, this pleading, you need to be very, very careful. First of all, at the first instance, don't look at order 16 and 17, sorry, 17 especially. Think that there is no order 6, rule 17 at all in CPC and draft, right? Then you will be very careful. But in a situation where you are compelled to seek an amendment, you have order 6, rule 17, take recourse to it. But these are the areas which you have to focus. Lot of case law is there. Today you need, I have only given you, see, my idea is not to just make an academic speech, but I wanted you, the young lawyers, to keep these parameters in mind and then investigate. Because case law sometimes comes handy and then you may not be finding it the necessity to read. I don't want to give you everything so handy for a trial lawyer, and seniors doesn't require, they already have on their tips. So I wanted these young lawyers to bestow your thinking on these lines, and I'm sure you will be very good draftsmen when it comes to the drafting of pleadings. An art and an artist like you are well suited. So this is what my thought, that random rather. I don't even claim that this is the authoritative or anything. So I just like one of you had just made a little study, and I thought these are the things that I should share with you. And I hope that with this backdrop, it will help rather. My speech will help the young lawyers in taking more care in the pleadings. So therefore, friends, if you already know whatever I have said, ignore my speech. But if any one of you have find something useful in my speech, well, I will be very happy about it, and I welcome it. Thank you again. Now I leave it to the floor to have some discussion. You have questions means I will have an opportunity to know whether I know it or not, or learn it also. That would be good. No? Always. A classroom must be mutual, not one-sided. Students should speak more than the person who is so. But we are all here as students today. So I did my role as a student. The co-students also should do that. The group discussion will help us. So any question relevant to this, well, we can take it up, learn something more. Well, if you have no questions, also no problem. That means you understood completely. That's also doesn't matter. Anything is welcome, right?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Satish Moran has a question.
Sir, very good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thanks for your class, sir. Sir, I have one doubt, sir. Sir, could you tell me the difference between advocate and lawyer, sir? Because my friend said there has, if lawyer means they can hold degree, just bachelor of degree only, but they cannot have a registration for bar council. So that's what I want some clarity from you, sir.
See, as far as I know, under the Advocates Act, right?
Thank you. Okay, sir.
Who registers under the Advocates Act is called the advocate.
Okay, sir. But
then an advocate is not an advocate. He can be anybody, right? A lawyer, see, an advocate is entitled to plead in the court of law, right? Under the Advocates Act, only advocates are, the definition of advocate is that one who registers under that act. So, lawyer is a person who practices law. But practicing a law and practicing in a court of law is different. As far as I know, lawyer means one who is registered in the Bar Council under the Advocates Act. That's it. Maybe they see these advisory without coming to the court of law. That is a different. When we are talking about a lawyer before a court means advocate. And advocate, see, all advocates are lawyers, but all lawyers are not advocates unless they are registered before the under the concerned Advocates Act. Bar councils, they register. That's what I.
If there are any other questions, the participants can either post it in the chat box or use the raise hand option, post which I would unmute. There seems to be no questions for today.
That's good. Thank you all. Had a nice time.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. M. Suresh to Mr. Om Prakash to give the vote of thanks for today.
Good afternoon, everybody. It had been a wonderful session, traveling through the topic of pleadings in civil suits. This is the third session in the row. As you would have seen, the resource person, Dr. N.B. Badarinath, the Honorable Presiding Officer, DRT1, retired, had taken us through us in a very, very meticulous manner. If you recollect, in the first session, he in fact took us through the provisions under the Civil Procedure Code, explaining to you from Rule 16 and Rule 17 as to what would be material in placing a pleadings before the court, what is the material fact which you have to place, and what is the manner it has to be considered. Then he took us to you to the points of certain judgments on those particular rules as to how the courts construe that provision and what is the march of law. Then in the second session, you would have seen the resource person has taken us through how the pleadings travel as to when a written statement comes and if there is some inconsistency which is flowing, or your case getting a different flow based on the written statement or case based on the plaint. Then in such cases, the requirement of an amendment, whether amendment should be there, whether you should be permitted to withdraw your pleadings, whether you can ask for removal of certain pleadings, all these aspects were again touched in the context of judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court in a very lucid manner, explaining to you the very facts of those judgments and how that case was dealt by the trial court, and then how it was dealt by a high court, and then ultimately what the Supreme Court said as the law of land. Then the Honorable Presiding Officer had also taken you in a manner of an interaction, raising the issues before you and calling upon you to ponder upon it and give your insights in a manner making it a very interactive. And as a conclusion today, he has taken you on the point as to when an amendment is sought to be sought. Is it that you only request a particular amendment to be made, or you need to have a position on such amendment? Whether, as where he said that if there is an admission, if you seek for an amendment to that position, what would has to be required to be done? So in that context, the resource person has also explained to you the most important requirement of how a petition seeking for this amendment has to be put forth. So in this manner, in the gambit of the pleadings in a civil suits, an insight has been given as to how the provisions of the code put forth before you, and how the law has evolved itself in a manner, and how the Supreme Court has laid down the law for a consideration. And he had repeatedly made an emphasis that these sessions for the young lawyers to have a wonderful practice to develop your skills as a lawyer. As he was pointing out during the course of his lecture, that as the plaint takes its own course, it is also the lawyer who shines. So it is the contribution which you make which ultimately ends up having a focus on a particular lawyer. So that is where in this travel as a lawyer from an young junior, you shape up yourself as to how an issue has to be handled. And in that process, you get recognized by various persons. Therefore, the resource person had made an emphasis that as an young lawyer, it is most essential that you develop your tools, be it your reading habit, be it your understanding of situation, be it your analysis of a particular point, or be it as to how you ultimately convert this and put it before the court. So this aspect of pleadings is only one area of a lawyer, namely the draftsman which has to come forward. Then this takes you to the other facets of a lawyer. Then you may have to, how an evidence has to be appreciated, and how you have to conduct yourself, or how you have to prepare yourself for conducting a trial. So all these things would also still be open, and it is all. It is a request by the organizers on behalf of the study circle that the resource person would give us furthermore time, taking us through the other facets of a civil suit in the subsequent lectures. With these words, and I thank the Honorable Retired Presiding Officer, Dr. N.V. Badarinath. I thank all the organizers as well as the participants who had come up, who had in fact taken the best time at a most worst situation. The pandemic is a very challenging time, and in this challenging time, you have made this as a best time to get into some kind of learning process. So therefore, on behalf of the study circle, I also thank all the participants. Thanks for all of you. Thank you once again, sir. Thanks for all the participants.
Thank you.